U.S. Supreme Court late this morning ruling former President Trump may claim immunity from criminal prosecution for some of the actions he took in the waning days of his presidency.
That Supreme Court ruling recognizing former President Donald Trump's immunity claim for official acts as president, though rejected it for unofficial acts. The majority opinion delivered by Chief Justice John Roberts states while the president is not above the law, that he may not be prosecuted for exercising his core constitutional powers, and he is entitled to at least presumptive prosecution for his official acts. Still, it states that Trump is asserting a far broader immunity than the limited one we have recognized. Now, in the dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor countering that it makes a mockery of the principle foundational to our Constitution and system of government that no man is above the law.
For years, Donald Trump's legal team kept returning to one argument they believed could slow down or even block some of the cases surrounding him: presidential immunity. But after another legal setback tied to those arguments, attention is shifting fast, because this was never only about one ruling. The bigger fight has always been whether a former president can use immunity claims as a shield against criminal proceedings. Trump supporters argue the cases have been politically driven from the start, while critics say the legal system is simply moving forward the way it would for anyone else. Either way, something important is changing now. The delays are becoming harder to sustain, appeals are running into walls, and courtroom battles that once seemed distant are turning into immediate problems with consequences that may be impossible to push aside.
Guilty on all counts. Donald J. Trump, the 45th president of the United States, was found guilty late today in a New York courthouse on all 34 counts of falsifying business records to conceal payments to a porn star just before the 2016 election. The stunning verdict was delivered by a Manhattan jury of 7 men and 5 women who deliberated for 2 days, making Mr. Trump the first former American president to be convicted of a crime.
The pressure surrounding Trump's legal troubles intensified after the New York hush money case ended with a historic outcome: a jury finding him guilty on 34 felony counts connected to falsifying business records. Prosecutors argued the case involved efforts to hide damaging information during the 2016 campaign through financial arrangements that disguised the true purpose of payments, while Trump repeatedly rejected the case as politically motivated and unfair. The verdict instantly became one of the most talked about legal moments in modern American politics, because for the first time, a former president carried the label of convicted felon. But instead of ending the story, that conviction opened an entirely new phase built around appeals, challenges, and attempts to overturn or delay what happened in court.
Arguments over immunity for former President Trump in the federal election case have now wrapped up in the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. Trump's team claimed his actions on January 6th fell under his duties as president, saying he was, quote, looking for voter fraud. Trump's attorneys also echoed the former president's claims, telling the judge that prosecuting a former president would open a Pandora's box. The special counsel painted a picture of what they called a frightening future if presidents can't be held accountable for crimes.
Candidly, I think if the court gets to that second question, there are some hard questions about the nature of official acts. And frankly, as I think Judge Pan's hypothetical described, I mean, what kind of world are we living in if, as I understood my friend on the other side to say here, a president orders his SEAL team to assassinate a political rival and resigns, for example, before an impeachment? Not a criminal act.
After the conviction, Trump's legal team moved quickly, arguing that parts of the evidence presented during trial should have been protected, and pushing broader immunity claims in hopes of changing the outcome or delaying sentencing. Those arguments climbed through higher courts as lawyers tried to connect presidential protections to issues surrounding the case, turning what started as one prosecution into a larger constitutional fight over the limits of immunity itself. But as courts continued responding, critics began arguing that Trump's longtime strategy of delay through appeals and procedural battles was facing increasing resistance. That raised a bigger question hanging over every other case around him. If immunity arguments start failing in one place, what happens when similar defenses appear in the cases still waiting ahead?
The January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, where 5 people died and over 140 police officers were injured, is just one of the several possible legal challenges the former president could still face in court now that he is a private citizen. Georgia is quickly becoming another problem. And I remember when I heard about, the second impeachment, I wondered why they didn't just zero in on the phone call that he made pressuring, election officials down there to find more votes, because I thought that was a very obvious case case of abuse of power. And then there's New York, and there's a series of investigations in New York. The New York State Attorney is investigating the Trump family business and whether or not some of the tax filings may have been criminal in nature. And then Manhattan District Attorney is also looking into criminal behavior in relation to the family business, not just for Donald Trump, but also for his family members.
What makes this moment more significant is that Trump's legal challenges have never existed in isolation. The New York conviction may be one case, but surrounding it are other investigations and prosecutions involving election interference allegations, classified documents, and state-level charges tied to efforts to challenge election results. Each case carries different evidence, different legal standards, and different potential consequences. Yet critics have argued that many of Trump's broader defense strategies relied on similar themes: delay, procedural fights, and questions around presidential authority. If courts become less willing to accept those arguments, prosecutors in separate cases may gain confidence moving forward, which could accelerate legal timelines in ways Trump's team has spent years trying to avoid. With appeals facing obstacles, attention turns towards sentencing in the New York case, where legal observers have debated what consequences could realistically follow. Some believe the nonviolent nature of the charges and the unprecedented reality of sentencing a former president makes severe punishment less likely, while others argue the historical significance alone makes the outcome impossible to minimize. Even if penalties end up lighter than many expected, the conviction itself remains politically and legally powerful because it becomes part of the permanent record. For supporters, that changes nothing about how they view Trump. For opponents, it reinforces arguments they have made for years. But for everyone watching, the bigger issue may be whether the legal label attached to Trump begins influencing future courtrooms, future campaigns, and future decisions. The cases still ahead are where many legal analysts believe the stakes become much higher because they involve allegations tied to election interference, handling of classified documents, and broader accusations around efforts to overturn results after the 2020 election. Unlike financial record cases, some of these charges involve allegations connected directly to federal processes, national security concerns, or organized efforts across multiple individuals. Trump has denied wrongdoing and challenged the cases aggressively, but if prosecutors succeed in moving them forward, the potential consequences could become far more serious than political headlines. And that is why every ruling connected to immunity or delay tactics receives so much attention now, because people on both sides understand these battles may shape everything that comes next. Beyond the legal arguments, there is also the political reality that follows every courtroom development involving Trump. Supporters have continued to frame the prosecutions as evidence of a justice system being used against a political opponent, while critics argue the opposite, that accountability matters regardless of who once held power. But elections are often decided by smaller groups of voters sitting somewhere in the middle, and those voters may respond differently to years of legal headlines, convictions, and ongoing trials. Questions about trust, stability, and leadership begin appearing alongside policy debates, turning courtroom outcomes into campaign issues, whether candidates want them there or not. There is also another layer that receives less attention: the pressure these cases create behind the scenes. Multiple prosecutions across different jurisdictions mean different judges, different legal teams, separate timelines, and constant public scrutiny. Managing one major criminal case is difficult. Managing several while remaining at the center of national politics creates pressure few public figures have experienced before. As legal options narrow, every decision becomes more important because unsuccessful strategies do not simply disappear. They reduce the number of moves available next. The broader institutional question extends far beyond Donald Trump himself. At the center of these disputes is a debate over how much protection former presidents should receive once they leave office, and where legal accountability begins or ends. Courts have wrestled with those questions while balancing concerns about executive power, constitutional limits, and equal treatment under the law. The outcome affects more than one person, because future presidents will watch closely. Every ruling helps define what protections remain after leaving office, and what risks continue long after political power ends. For years, many people believed the legal battles surrounding Donald Trump would remain tied up in appeals, delays, and procedural fights with no clear ending. Now, whether someone sees these cases as accountability or political targeting, one thing is becoming harder to deny: the The pressure is no longer easing. Courtrooms are moving, timelines are shifting, and decisions made in the months ahead could shape not only Trump's future, but also how presidential power is viewed for years to come. The question is no longer whether these battles matter. The question is how far the consequences will actually reach. Let me know what you think below. Are these cases changing American politics permanently, or will they strengthen Trump politically instead?